Welcome back to the Futurist New Deal podcast. I'm Johan Ben Zion, and I'm here with my friend and a new entry into our race, Kimberly Forsythe, the new World Optimist, and she's running on something rather like a fully automated luxury communism ticket, I think. I'm very excited to learn more about that. I'm a supporter of this idea, and I want to support her. I think we should support her in any way that we can, and be talking about building alliances towards the best kind of techno progress that we could possibly hope for. Hi, Kimberly. How you doing?
Good. How you doing?
Pretty good. Pretty good. Good to see you again. Good to see you again.
Likewise.
um, what about what I just said about FALK? Pardon me. What about what I just said about FALC? Uh, uh, um, do you feel it's an accurate description?
A fully automated luxury communism?
Yeah, yeah. Is that
An accurate description as
well? Do you
far
think that
as
this level of
it,
automation and this kind of approach to policy making, do you think that describes your ticket?
yes, I am a huge fan of it. That is very well known. I don't hide that. I would love to pursue that. However, I still, as usual, want to kind of keep things based more in reality, and focusing on steps on. I mean, I figure we're going to get there naturally anyway. So how can we kind of, cushion any kind of blowback
Yeah.
to automation. So I think that's mostly what I'm actually going to focus on. As I
Mm.
mentioned, like earlier today, the aquaponic systems, figuring out ways. I mentioned the other day, what is it, negative rent?
Mm.
Systems like that is what I want to explore further.
Yes, yes, and it's good that you have implementations there and bridges to things of this kind. This is something that other tickets may be lacking, and particularly in an area where we are describing ideas that in things that in practice have not been tested in prototypes or institutional forms. There is no basis for us understanding a world with full automation. There is no basis for us describing a world with post-scarcity. It almost boggles the mind to even consider notions of post-scarcity. It's good. It is an excellent strategy to be thinking about the near-term policy implications. There's a gentleman who's just entered the race, and he's written about 100 words total on the subjects of describing his platform. And he's described, he seems to be a right libertarian, someone who wants to dismantle certain features of the federal government. And there's a case to be made for that sort of thing. But if you're not able to describe your positions and describe what happens if you succeed in doing the things that you want to do, and how you might get there, then it becomes just a kind of I'm wondering if how many more of these participation trophy type candidates we're going to have in this race.
I know. That's true. I was like, I'm here a little on the reluctant side because I'm not prepared at all, just so you know.
Well, yeah,
Um,
it's
but
that's a big thing, right? Because
right.
we this was an audible. This was a quick decision that was made on the part of the leadership, and so these campaigns are having to do that as well. So you can't fault everyone for not being as prepared as we were with the Futurist New Deal, having a team working on this for quite some time. But at the same time, if you feel strongly about these things, I should imagine someone like other candidates who've been in the race for a while, they should be able to write about these things and defend these things and do interviews about these things. Um,
Agreed.
yes. I noticed that I hate to be name checking people, but I noticed that a guy who I really admire, BJ Murphy, a wonderful writer and thought leader in our community, he tweeted some support for you, or tweeted some interest in your campaign, or rather, he commented some interest in your campaign, and I wanted to talk a little bit about this idea of your campaign some more. You're kind of running to the left of me, it seems.
Into the what? I'm sorry?
Running to the left.
Oh, to the left.
Yeah.
I guess you could consider it that way, yes.
Exciting.
Again, I must stress that when it comes to saying left or right, there are aspects that I believe, at least in my experience in dealing with people, that they fall very, very in the middle of a lot of those things, even if they claim to be left or right. But yeah, I think overall, I'm probably a lot more left. Falling off the graph.
Yeah. Well, a basic income for everybody is a controversial notion, but the way that it's funded and the tax reforms that coincide with that, it was devised in such a way. If I were the sole architect of the Futurist New Deal, it might be tending to be a different sort of story in terms of where we are on the political compass, you and I as well. But yeah, as you say, the answer to politics should not just be merely rhetoric. It should be implementations and uses of ideas in a practical way, not merely an ideologue's paradise. So tell us a little bit more about what made you decide to enter this race and what you see happening in the next few weeks.
Well, I decided to do it. Honestly, I sat there and I stared at the application for quite a while. And I'm like, well, do I really want to? I mean, this means, putting myself out there like on interviews and things like that. But I decided that it would be more important for me to come out of my comfort zone, dedicate a lot more time instead of just, talking in the Facebook group, or maybe writing a few articles here and there, dedicate a lot more time to actually spreading the message. I've always wanted to be a voice for change, but I've never been one to really want to have a following, or be considered really a leader. So that was kind of tough for me, but I came out of the comfort zone and decided, all right, I'm going to be an inspiration and at least, try to bring not necessarily harmony, but a little more cohesiveness to the group. So
very nice, very nice. And I suppose we could talk about ideas around fully automated luxury communism. There's a book by Aaron Bastani that describes these ideas at great length. And this is, in some ways, it's the core of this is similar to our basic income. Now, I've described a basic income as I see it as a stopgap, because I feel that those more fully realized post-industrial mechanisms, ultimately leading to post-scarcity, are a few years away. And so we won't necessarily have the same kind of social programs in that framework that we require today. But the idea of, in any event, whether it's a stopgap for some short period of years or some longer period of decades, the idea that we should be liberated from wage slavery and from work, I think it should be an uncontroversial notion. In the United States, there's an idea that that a job is somehow something that you have in relation to a multinational corporation, rather than something that you would do under your own steam in starting a small business or building a partnership or starting other initiatives, working with a cooperative. These things are far more natural and have a far deeper history than the corporate structures that people in this country think of as the better form of that. And so what do you think? What do you think about this? The brainwashing of people in this country?
I do believe that we need to get over this notion that our self-worth is tied to strictly what we do. It's one of those, it's such a commonplace icebreaker. So what do you do?
Mm,
And there's an instant need for us to sometimes even embellish what it is that we do, or embellish like our resume and things like that to
mm,
it's the keeping up with the Joneses effect.
mm,
And I think that we need to overcome a lot of that. I do uh, feel that, like, okay, let's take artists, for example.
mm,
It is often said, I have known a lot in my life, and they've often said that when somebody asks, what do you do? Well, I'm an artist. And then they're like, kind of the reaction is like, oh, okay, sure, and that's not okay.
mm,
That's them pursuing their passion. And another thing I found is a lot of the times if you try to ask somebody what their passion is, they don't know. They have
mm,
no idea. Or if they do have a sense of it, they have no idea how they could make a living at it. And so they figure they're just going to be stuck, doing what they're doing in their wage slave job the rest of their lives. And they've settled for that.
mm,
Personally, I have come to the understanding that I'm, for the most part, unemployable. I used to be the corporate type. I was the type who was, working 12 hours a day and going above and beyond, doing the job of three different people. And managers loved me, but did it do anything for me? I mean, it gave me a
mm,
sense of satisfaction, but it also caused a lot of, you know, strife in my life. So, I definitely think that we need to just kind of take a step back
mm,
and learn what it is to be happy, not what it is to be controlled by the dollar or by the your title, but learn what it is to be happy.
mm. And I think that I can already see that you're channeling that high-powered kind of persona into this campaign, and that's exciting. And that's exciting. We need more people like you fighting the good fight in this way. Um,
Empowered.
and
Yes, we can all do this.
um, the New York Times, in an op-ed earlier this year, wrote about fully automated luxury communism, and we do have a lot of problems in this world. We have a climate crisis, which is the result of industry. In industries that we don't even recognize as being a big part of the problem. We're a lot of people on Earth like to eat meat, but that's the number two. Factory farming is the number two contributor to that climate crisis after fossil fuels, and automation has been very much a story of the 20th century. But those gains in productivity have not been used to increase quality of life and human development in this country to the extent that they should have been. If we had productivity tied to wages directly, those wages would be radically higher, 5 or 6 times higher. But so what we have instead is a system in these corporatist states of America where these heads of these large concerns are sapping a value from the public trust and they're the ones who are benefiting not solely, but to a very, very high degree from this automation. And a fully automated luxury communism suggests not just correcting that, but initiating and catalyzing a series of undertakings wherein we would be enhancing techno progress. And there's principally through the use of more robust, advanced algorithms on automation. This is an AI ticket. Tell us about your feelings about advanced algorithms, AI. I always like to say advanced algorithms in the same breath because I personally bristle at the term. It's used to describe a lot of metaphysical notions. But tell us about AI.
As far as my personal feelings, you said?
Or yeah, or maybe the role of AI as you see it generally in the coming years, and how it might advance these near-term initiatives that you would describe in the New World Optimist platform.
Well, I think we're a little ways out, although I could be totally wrong because it seems like every single day we hear about these amazing advancements coming down the line. But in I do I am very concerned that it is going to lead to mass unemployment. It is going to lead, and yes, a lot of people like to say, oh, well, yeah, even when it becomes, more advanced, it's going to take a while for small businesses to get it. It's going to take a while for, government to adopt it and things like that. On one hand, you're correct. But on the other hand, you got to understand it's these major corporations that are really, focusing on building all of this. And if they get it first, those little small businesses aren't going to need to attempt to get a government grant to, advance their own because they're going to be wiped out, period. So I do think that we need to understand, I hate to use the term AI apocalypse because that's like so fear-mongering, but we need to understand the problems that it can cause, and we need to focus on ways to, and we can't rely on big corporations to do this for us. We have to do it ourselves, because otherwise it will turn into, what they call 1984. It's like, but and I don't want to see that happen. So I'm more optimistic that collectively the people will be able to recognize what's coming down the line and be able to make steps to prepare for that.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you mentioned that that corporations are in many ways drivers of these things. It gets into questions about the role of syndicates generally, and I'm reminded of what we spoke about a moment ago with the lab grown meats, and because that was an initiative that was spearheaded by a plutocrat, a wealthy tech guy, Sergey Brin, paid people to make that first burger, and it cost $350,000, and now that cost has come down to something that's competitive with these more damaging kinds of food.
And how many years did that take? Do you know that offhand? I don't know that offhand. Not very
Well,
long.
I mean, it's been about 10 years from soup to nuts to get to this point where these things are now coming to market. And we should say also that there's a lot of faux meats coming to market too in the last year or so that don't have any animal product, lab grown or otherwise, but that taste an awful lot like these meats. And those things are becoming serious competitors on the marketplace as well.
Yeah.
And but I had to talk with a few gentlemen on the subject of DARPA and the role that this particular syndicate has played in techno progress, which is quite sizable. There's a very real sense in which the United States might not be a Silicon Valley. The United States might not be the seat of AI and a lot of advanced technology had it not been for these military-industrial complex initiatives and spending. Now, my feeling is that moving forward, it's why I'm in favor of something like full automation and a highly networked society. My feeling is that the Brotherhood of Man is itself that syndicate of a much larger scale than and Ben Goertzel says this sort of thing quite often than the military-industrial complex could ever be. But we do, I think, owe it to ourselves to at least consider the roles that various institutions played in the growth, our growth towards ultimately a techno-utopian society.
Don't use that word utopian.
Yeah, that's a bad word, right?
It's a bad
word. I'm looking at an article from the Acton Institute, a socially conservative and somewhat right libertarian think tank, and they are attacking the idea of fully automated luxury communism. But in the interest of this kind of understanding that there's wisdom to be had from most every point of view, I wanted to look at some of these ideas. One
All
of
right.
them is simply that this is a glib notion. It doesn't really describe a lot of practical implementations or policy ideas, and it's just a fun communism. People trying to uh, have these, what happens on the right often in discussions of these kinds, right-wing thought experiments around technology that seem to deflect from conversations about actual policy reforms. I would say that this kind of almost falls into the category of a left-wing thought experiment. How do you address those concerns?
As far as the right wing,
Uh, uh,
that's the glib
the idea
notion.
the idea that a luxury fully automated luxury communism is not is not even attempting to be a serious try at reform and policymaking.
Ah, okay. Well, I can, from my own personal perspective, I can say to that is that it's entirely new territory that we're entering here. And part of the difficult, and at least in the things that I've pondered, one of the most difficult parts of it is seeing how we actually get there. And a lot of the times it's like, okay, how does it transform? Okay, does it do it kind of naturally? That's not going to happen, I don't think. And we don't really want to speak out and say, well, it's going to take a pretty harsh collapse, because we don't want to envision that. We don't want that to happen. So, how do we prevent that harsh collapse? And preventing it, I think, is one of the hardest things to talk about. It really is. But I do believe that as more minds come to the understanding of what it means, I'll be honest, I don't think the word communism is the best word to use, because once you say that word, it is an instant wall that goes up with almost everybody, unless it's another commie, a fellow commie. But like here in Estonia, okay, if I try, they are victims. Oh my goodness, if you've ever read about the history of Stalin coming in and
Yeah.
Nazi Germany coming in and taking over, I mean, and it's so fresh in their minds that they just recently broke out from underneath communism. So you say that word, and that brings up a whole lot of issues for them. And the same is true for the rest of the world, but probably not to much, the same extent. But I don't think that it actually is the best word to describe the vision of the future that they're trying to achieve, if that makes sense.
Mm.
Um, you know, so when it comes to kind of backtracking a little bit, when it comes to actually creating policy reform, it's not easy. It's not going to be easy, but it needs to be done. And well, like you mentioned before, the UBI is a good step towards that.
Mm.
And I think also the vertical farming is a good step towards that. Now we've got two good steps. We need to kind of meander into other areas that are going to keep people, give them that safety net, that cushion to make that transition, and hopefully not make it a bloody one.
Mm, mm, mm. And reasonable people can disagree that the extent to which this is true, but certainly there is an awful lot of truth in the idea that an attempt to create large states with planned economies, and certainly the industrialized elements of those, being unfamiliar with how those are implemented, that's contributed to a lot of deaths. So whether we say that Stalin was some real communist or not, certainly under the banner of communism, Stalin killed a lot of people, um,
Yes.
and that is a large number. And I would say that precisely the same thing about the nomenclature as well. That I don't know that that's the most useful of terms, but it's a little bit like this 2016 Sanders campaign managed to defang words which were used in a hateful and confusing way, like socialism, to a high degree. And in doing so, now in 2020, people are actually able to have ordinary conversations that are commonplace in the rest of the developed world about the need for public health service, about the need for ordinary reforms to capitalism that would allow it to be a better functioning entity. I think that I don't know the answer as to what the best strategy there is with respect to full automation. But it's good that we can be having these kinds of conversations. And I think it also bears repeating in the same breath of talking about these many deaths in the 20th century that the 20th century was by far the most peaceful of in terms of per capita violence and per capita providence. Much more peaceful and better for anyone than previous centuries. And that's a trajectory that continues, just as Moore's law is a trajectory that has now become a part of us. These steady moves towards techno progress, I believe, are largely the drivers of that. It's easy to look at the headlines and think that bad things happened in the 20th century, but there was a lot less, it really, going back even just 200 years prior to that, your likelihood of being murdered at birth was about 20%. And in the 20th century, those numbers dropped precipitously. Not murdered at birth, but in the course of your life.
I knew what you meant.
Yeah. That's a really tribal society, people being murdered at birth.
Noah times.
Well, it's good that you're able to address these concerns around a full automation society. I wanted to be doing more discussions of these kind, but I admit that I was wanting to. The U.S. Transhumanist Party has a lot of ideological diversity. Just as technology, it's a thing that everybody uses. Everybody likes smart devices. Everybody uses technology. Everybody's into technology. So the diversity of thought in our party is almost as diverse as the ideologies in the general population, and that makes for an interesting challenge in trying to write a ticket.
Right. You don't want to necessarily associate the party with one particular political ideology, and that can be difficult to do since we have to, like Highlander, only, in the end, there can only be one. So once that one is chosen, it's very, we have to understand that there is the possibility that the mainstream media or people out there will automatically associate the political ideology of that person with the entire party. So yeah, it can be a little difficult.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of ways in which the Futurist New Deal has been, I think, trying and striving very well to bridge those ideological gaps in this community. But now we have more people entering this race. And we don't know how many more people will be entering this race. So we don't quite know what to expect, but I'm pretty pleased with just being able to have this conversation with you and being able to have an ongoing dialogue with you. The 10-hour a day work week, the wage slavery that we talked about. There's 55% of people in this country are working in service jobs. 55% of the workers are working in service jobs. They're earning artificially low wages. They've been maintained at an through all manner of artifice, and those people have artificially high housing costs. That's been maintained by corporatist fiat as well. Quantitative easing was was imposed to keep those prices from coming down, and essentially is one way of looking at it. There's a big problem on our horizon in as we're looking at this march of progress and this great chasm between the haves and have-nots. And I think that a discussion of full automation is many ways the answer. So I don't view these conversations as being too glib. 35% of jobs are being automated away. That's not just a joke.
That's not a public number, no.
Yeah. Um, uh, so tell us a little bit more about some of these things that you want to see happening to get us to post-scarcity. What else do you imagine the world looking like for Americans in 20 years?
Man, I could go probably 20 different ways on that. I really could. The optimist in me, wants to believe and wants to encourage that we recognize it now and start making steps towards, easing the blow. Um, the little bit of pessimist in me says, yeah, people aren't getting it. Come on, people, wake up. So for what I see in the next 20 years, I don't know. I really don't. Like I tell my daughter all the time, she's going to turn 14 in a couple of days. And I tell her all the time, it's like, I want to, on one hand, encourage her to, pursue a certain career, something that she loves to draw. Okay. She creates art on her tablet. And I want to, push her to do that. But at the same time, I go and I read an article about AI, creating like with just little squiggles, creating these wonderful backdrops. And it's like, well, shoot, where do we encourage the youth to go from there? Yes, we can encourage them to go and do, STEAM careers. But is that really going to do anything? I'm not 100% sure, to be honest. I'm really not. I can go 50 different ways on it.
Very nice.
What about you? You can tell me. What do you see in the next 20 years?
Well, when people naturally when having these conversations, I think they turn to one particular cultural monolith, Star Trek, more than anything else. And
I love the idea.
Star Trek, the post-scarcity of Star Trek and the post-monetary qualities of Star Trek and so forth. These things are set hundreds of years in the future. But many of the things that would allow for something like that, they already existed in prototype form at the turn of this century. 3D printing elements, personalized medicine elements, and we're increasingly seeing more of those options. I spoke to a gentleman named Florian Marcus. I think you know who he is.
Yes, I do.
Because you introduced me to him. He's an Estonian minister for e-governance and Estonia, an emissary there. And we talked at length about e-services in government and digitalization, and specifically blockchain voting was a big topic of conversation. But towards the end of the talk, we started talking about how the good work that they've done has set the stage for now using the public health service in a similar way, a blockchain medicine, and this, it's not just a buzzword. It would be a system that allows for the constant oversight, maybe first via iWatch, of a person's health, using big data to really understand what's going on with our bodies and with the public health of our society, and then continuing down this path to personalized medicine in a real way, to such a degree that we could see societies leapfrogging into a life extension framework at a lower cost than our current, because we know that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, and much of 85% of public health costs today are associated with end of life. And if we shift those resources in a responsible way to prevention and oversight and these automated usages, this is a way. The first step I see our society in moving to into this sort of Star Trek kind of model, and then we'll see ripple effects in other marketplaces. And there's a tremendous. Paul Spiegel pointed this out. There's a tremendous value added in making in raising life expectancy. There's a lot of costs associated with the society for people not living as long and being unwell. And so just adding a few years, potentially in a country the size of the United States, adding the trillions of dollars in value to the marketplace.
All very valid points. Very valid.
Yeah, it's the way that I have tried to focus the Futurist New Deal toward because I believe that removing the government corruption that we see in the United States and implementing e-governance and the basic income are the first steps toward these other ripple effects that we would see. And the public health and the National Public Health Service is also the third of the three major pillars of the Futurist New Deal.
Yes.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting stuff. So Rachel Haywire, somewhat of a gadfly in our race, is saying that your trip to Estonia is a problem. I don't see that as a problem. How are you addressing these concerns?
Oh, I mean, there's absolutely no basis in saying that whatsoever, because I'm still a citizen and technically a legal resident of the United States. So, and like I said, if I were to be nominated, in the off chance I were to be nominated, I'd come back to the U.S., hang out for a little while and really pursue helping to spread the word. But then I would also keep my the projects that I have going here with the Estonian government going, help to pursue those as well and build ties between the US and the Estonian governments. So it's a non-issue. But she did make a good point. It would be very interesting if we had other people who are, legally able to enter from around the world, adding in different perspectives. I do agree that it would be very, very interesting to see.
Yes, and I would just say in practical terms, my own campaign has been largely a virtual affair, and so I wouldn't see any serious problem with that. I should think that we might tend to draw a line as a person being a U.S. national, as that is in the Constitution, but. Yes, but you clearly don't have.
If they're otherwise legally allowed to enter the campaign, if they're a citizen of somewhere else, unfortunately, I would encourage them to build their own transhumanist party within their country, within their own political framework, and that would be absolutely amazing to see, especially if we could all of us begin to network a little bit better and kind of create more of a global cohesion. I really want to see that happen. Yeah.
As do I. One of my favorite quotes, I think it's probably even in a thumbnail, in if you're looking at my Skype here, is from a young woman who's no stranger to controversy in recent years, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and but she addressed this idea of concerns about wage slavery and automation in this quote. Now I can't pull it up. smooth move, Ben.
I know it's your the Facebook profile too. So right?
Yeah. It was for quite some time. Not anymore. But let's, so we should not be haunted by the specter of being automated out of work. We should be excited by that. But the reason we're not excited by this is because we have to live in a society where if you don't have a job, you're left to die. and that is at its core a problem. And this may sound like a sentiment, purely a mawkish idea, but it also describes great dysfunction in the working of the civil society, in inefficacies that cost us a lot in the marketplace. In a number of municipalities have done this in recent years, and one of them is in Utah, my neighbor to the north, where they have anytime a person is on the street, they give them housing. And this may again sound like a strange notion, but the costs to those municipalities in indirect ways for a person not being housed are higher. They're spending 3 times as much on medical bills, emergency services of other kinds, and as it would be to spend that few $1,000s to put them in housing. And more importantly, then those people are making a contribution again. Those people are reaching out to their families again, and it's not a slippery slope that leads us toward a bunch of lazy people who don't want to work for corporations. It's a slippery slope that leads us towards a bunch of people who are small business owners, the truer form of a free market, who are living a better life and starting their own initiatives and rejoining the traditional workforce as well, doing all of those things. So it's something that we have to plan for, and we have to have the political will and acceptance of to truly be able to do that. And I think framing the conversation around concerns of yours and mine, rather than the right-wing thought experiments coming from other candidates that very little to do with public policy, no serious interest in public policy. And also some of these candidates, their base, they seem to be anti-transhumanist. They're speaking out against life extension. They're speaking out against organizations that have done nothing but try to help us in these broad public health initiatives and these broad initiatives towards techno progress. And I don't trust anyone who's fan, no matter what they're saying, if most of their fans are people that hate transhumanists or make fun of transhumanists all the time. That's not the kind of people that we need to be including in this organization, in my view. And we have to be willing to have these conversations, but we have to be smart enough to recognize these people for what they are, carpetbaggers.
Yes, and I do believe that the majority of the membership base do pay very close attention. We have an extremely intelligent membership base, and they do pay close attention to various words, that are used and actions, and because actions speak louder than words. So I do believe that overall, we're not at threat of being, from no matter who the party is, from being, snuffed out of existence. Especially, one thing I really want to see us overcome is to overcome fear, because it seems like fear is what motivates like 75% of what we do, if not more. And by encouraging people to overcome the fear and talking to them, pointing out these things, it's going to take a lot of time and effort, but I do believe that we can achieve that in time.
Very nice. Very nice. And yeah, I was talking with Steele last night. We did an interview for about 2 hours. And a lot of it was about the perils of fear-based thinking in politics, and also just other reactionary forces in a more general sense, and how those are being manipulated by these are not naturalistic kinds of things that are happening. They're being seeded by grastroturfers. They're being seeded by master manipulators with huge data mining operations and big data driven companies doing these things, and
Spend
that's
billions studying the
mhm, mhm,
psychology of the human being and how they are motivated to do or go, sway their opinion a certain way.
mhm,
And it's difficult for us average people to come up against that, to
mhm,
defend ourselves from that.
mhm,
And the more that you recognize the tactics that they use, the more you will begin to recognize them in our own selves, and in others.
mhm,
But then again, that I'll just let you know that it goes into a big old rabbit hole about, cognitive biases
mhm,
and how many of those that there are. Um, but yeah, and I think I've mentioned this before in the group, but anybody who's watching this, if you are unfamiliar with the way that public relations works and the way that political opinion is swayed,
mhm,
definitely watch the documentary by Adam Curtis, the Century of the Self.
mhm,
And if you are aware of it, then start spreading the word about the tactics that are used.
mhm, mhm. Yes, the and it's something that it's a basic part of cultural literacy to understanding to in understanding how marketing and other forms of manipulation are used in our society. But it's hard. It's hard to resist. It's a nice, cool drink from the fire hose
Yeah,
in the world that we live of social media now.
I
And
love that.
so it's hard to be that vigilant all the time.
Yeah.
But and the thing that really bothers me about this discussion is Peter Thiel is one of maybe these top 10 big data manipulators. This company Palantir, and his investment in Facebook and so forth. But this is a guy who has strong feelings about life extension that I agree with. He spent money, some monies, to promote life extension. He could be doing this kind of big data manipulation not in the interest of unabashed corporatist pigs, but in the interest of life extension, to be trying to set the stage for people being far more accepting of super longevity instead of people being tricked into supporting an oligarchy that already exists and that maybe feels would be too difficult to try to reform. Um, so that upsets me because we have it. In some ways, it reflects the ways in which people in our more localized USTP community are not truly working in the best interests of techno progress and of these public health goals. And every day in every one of these conversations and chats, I'm seeing it over and over again. People people just saying, there was resistance to that wording in this codex that was published between the candidates and USTP campaign advisors and so forth about the language about life extension and super longevity. That there was resistance from people in these particular right-wing camps saying we don't care about life extension. They don't care about transhumanism at all, I fear.
That is why we really need to unify our message as to what exactly transhumanism is,
Mm,
because it encompasses so much,
mm,
and it just as diverse as the political opinion is or a definition of what transhuman is or what it means to a person. So either maybe come to the idea that we break them off into separate groups, or do we keep them lumped together under one name?
mm,
Or, but those are the hard questions that we need to ask. And those are the hard questions as a group we need to figure out. And at the same time, hopefully it will begin to lessen the oligarchs' control on all of this information and all of um, the the direction that the life extension or transhumanism is headed.
mm,
Um, we either do it now, we get a rein on it now, or we end up living in what everybody fears and Logan's Run 1984, any dystopian novel that you want to quote from.
mm,
That's
mm,
what we will end up in. But we're
mm.
not there yet.
Yeah,
Damn it.
yeah. Yeah, I don't concern myself too much with Malthusian ideas. We mentioned Logan's Run. Um, I, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts. My feeling is that in the developed world, which every society is really in this at this rate of techno progress, poised to be in this developed world framework. There's such a degree of stabilization of birth rates and other effects around automation that I feel that we're not at risk any longer of a runaway population of birth. At the same time, we have a very large population of birth now, and it's something we have to be mindful of it and be trying to legislate for to see that stability is there. Not legislating for the birth rate specifically, but they're, indirectly. Uh, there are transhumanists that want to legislate the birth rate. Um,
Yeah, I know. I
uh,
mean, it's okay. We don't want to go that
Wonderful.
authoritarian unless it's absolutely necessary, and hopefully we don't get there, you know?
Yeah,
I mean, come on.
yeah, yeah. Um, it's very very interesting stuff. I think we could probably go on for days and days and days. Um,
Oh,
um,
yes.
uh, there. What do you see being the driver of transhumanism? We mentioned this diversity of ideas here. What do you see the driver of transhumanism as it's being foisted onto the public stage in a bigger way? What do you see? What are your number one issues in this community?
Well, you just to clarify, you're saying what I believe will be the
Well, like
most
I think that
popular?
life extension, that wording in the codex about life extension came from me. I wasn't terribly concerned about the degree to which people are making nice. I mean, I was concerned about this as a result of attacks on Humanity Plus. But prior
Right.
to that time, I was kind of just, there's kind of a wink and, a smile with that. If people want to run a negative campaign, that's what we'll do. If people want to run a positive campaign, I think that's more reflective of transhumanist goals. But it's not entirely up to me.
Right.
um, so I was pleased with this wording that described um, a better class of discourse, to be sure. But for me, the reason that I'm a transhumanist and not us working to build out the longevity party is because transhumanists are dedicated to these public health goals, and by and large, certainly the rank and file of this organization and much of our base is. And if that were not the case, I would probably not be in this party because there's an awful lot of parties and ideas that promote many of these other technocratic or tech progress notions. So for me, life extension is number one. But there's other things that are equally as important. What made you want to be a member of the U.S. Transhumanist Party?
I don't have a single answer for that.
Mm, mm,
I really don't.
mm,
Other than I firmly believe it is the next stage in human evolution.
mm. Do you think that life extension is in the cards for yourself?
For probably the last 15, 20 years, I've been under the impression that I probably will not live past 50, which really, I kind of hope I'm wrong on that because my son is turning 3 in a few days. So,
Mm, mm,
um, and my daughter turning 14, I want to live for quite a while longer. But I'm not 100% sure. I'm
mm,
really not. I believe it is definitely in their cards.
mm.
Um,
Yes.
but whether or not I see it in the next 10, 15 years, we'll see.
Mm. Yeah, and it's nice to think of that labor of love. That even if we don't move towards cell death for everyone in my own lifetime, that we have done the work for those that we love in the younger generation.
And what is I mean, it may be kind of corny to say, but what is that one inspirational meme that you see all around Facebook? A wise man plants a tree knowing that he will never be able to sit in its shade, something to
Mm,
that effect.
mm,
And I really think that people should adopt that mentality quite a bit more, because when you talk to people about these futurist changes, that's one of the first walls that they throw up, is that, well, it ain't happening anytime soon. I'm never going to see it. Like,
mm,
I don't give a shit if you're not going to see it. Okay.
mm,
If people, if our ancestors had had that exact same mentality,
mm,
things would be a lot worse. I mean, we wouldn't have
mm,
progress. So
mm,
get
mm,
over that, get over yourself,
mm,
and realize that we are responsible for creating the world that the next generation is going to live in. They were responsible for the world that we live in now, and we're responsible for changing it
mm,
and pushing it forward. So
mm.
yeah, most
And
definitely.
and I do hold out hope. George Church, he's pushing 70, and he's still a pretty spry guy, and certainly mentally is about as spry as they come. But he he a few weeks ago he published a excuse me, Alexa, stop.
I miss my Alexa. I had Alexa and Google Home. I tried to make them fight, but I could never get them to do it. It's
Yeah,
like, God.
yeah. It's good to get like 20 of them in a room and then say like, Alexa, tell me a joke, and then hear 20 different jokes.
My son used to love the fart noises. Alexa, give me a fart. Oh my God. You don't know how many times I heard that. That's it. The only reason I'm glad we don't have an Alexa anymore.
uh, so George Church published a series of ideas, implementations for life extension and also human enhancement of very specific gene therapies that we can be having in very short order. So George Church is about 70 years old almost, and he yet is thinking that life extension is in the cards for him. Now, George Church has access to certain kinds of experimental medications that I might not, but and not so
Yeah.
far beyond uh, a lot of people that we know in terms of their access to resources and things. So we shall see. I feel quite hopeful that life extension is in the cards for people of our generation.
I really do hope so as well. You asked me specifically, sometimes, like I said, I wonder if I'm going to be here.
Mm,
But when it comes to our generation, the millennials, oh, Dad, yeah,
mhm.
I really, really hope so. But definitely for sure for Generation Z, like
Mm.
lucky little bastards, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
But no. Um, I will say, what is it? David Sinclair. I'll be honest. I don't know a whole lot of the names that are in this, at least as far as exactly what their achievements have been. But David Sinclair, he was talking about some of the things that you can start doing today, and that I think I will start doing it. Next time I have a friend who goes to another foreign country that doesn't, require a whole lot of prescriptions, to pick up some of the things that he's mentioned. What is it? Metformin,
Mm,
NMN,
mm,
and I forget the third one. But I'm going to start doing them, and if there is something that I can do right now and it is within my power and it is fairly, affordable, then yeah, definitely. Might
yeah,
as well,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, and that brings to mind a right to try. That's one of the
Yeah.
less contentious issues in our community. Everybody who is a transhumanist favors, I think, tends to favor some kind of right to try. But and I think we should have a far more robust right to try. That again, it's not just oriented towards the end of life as it is today, but is allowing us to be planning for these life extension stratagems that you just described. Um, but there's a balance there, and I think that's something we could talk about in regulating healthcare generally. I don't think that they're diametrically opposed. Having the more robust right to try and having consumer protections in other areas, particularly building a public health service that would allow people to start to have access to this kind of far more advanced public health initiatives that we described in the context of Estonia and others.
Right.
You know, Paul Spiegel and I just did a whole talk about that, and it was a great talk. And he said, "When are you going to post that?" I got to get on top of posting that tonight. I got a couple of these.
You didn't post it? I thought you did already.
I posted. Well, yeah, I had to. I wanted to change the title card, so it's going to be reposted.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that happened. That happened once.
To watch your podcast grow. I mean, it's really amazing to see how quickly you've been able to get some amazing people on there, and I think that's phenomenal. I really
Okay.
congratulate you. You're
Well,
doing
just
fantastic.
in 2 days' time, I'm interviewing Liz Parrish of
Nice.
BioViva, and that's kind of a big one for me. So I'm excited. I'm really excited about that. And that's somebody who has such a breadth and depth of knowledge of the life sciences and emerging biomedicine that it's I really had to sit down, even though I'm pretty comfortable in talking about these things generally. Really had to sit down and meditate on that and do some more and do some research and make sure that I knew precisely what I'm going to say to her because it would be a disservice, I think, to our community to have too loose of a conversation in that context. But I kind of felt that way with David Wood as well. That he's such an intelligent man, has written so much on these subjects that, and I've been burning the candle at both ends a little bit lately. And I was
I
just
know.
also just overwhelmed to speak with him. So I was a little. I felt. There was a moment in that discussion where I just said, "Oh man, I wish I kind of wish a better guy than myself was interviewing David Wood." But it did go really well. It did go
Oh,
really. Yeah.
there's nobody better than you to be doing this podcast.
Oh, thank you.
Yes.
that
You are a strong voice for the community, and you build up that confidence. You're doing it's very, like I said, very interesting to see that you're building up the confidence and building up your voice.
yeah,
So be
yeah.
proud of yourself.
And part of it is burning the candle at both ends has very little to do with and not feeling confident or something. It has a lot to do with just making calls to every part of the earth at all hours
Yes,
and
yes,
sleeping when
that
I
I do
can.
understand.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So yeah, you know what
Yeah.
I mean.
Yeah, 1:37 in the morning for me.
Oh my God, yeah. Well, this has been a wonderful talk, Kimberly. I'm so pleased that you're in this race. I'm so pleased that I've gotten to know you over these months a little bit better. And I hope whatever the outcome of this race, that we'll be working together to bring these features of techno progress that we hold so dear to the masses.
Yes, definitely agreed wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
And keep kicking ass, Ben. Seriously.
Thanks. Thanks. Is there any last word you want to say about the New World Optimist ticket, or just any word of signaling your plans, or anything along those lines that you want to say about your campaign?
No, because it's only this morning that I met with Steele, and I did go on and I spent the next few hours clarifying my position on the Constitution.
Hmm.
So, what I do plan once we get off the line here is to, I've been, oh man, going through all of the hot button political issues and like really trying to clarify, write down what it is that I stand for so that people can get a really good idea of it.
Hmm. And you
And
should do that. But don't worry yourself about what someone like Haywire is saying about you. Has an incoherent political philosophy. She said
I
things 100 times
refuse,
more controversial. So the fact
I
that she's
refuse to take
she's the one
any of
who's
it.
critiquing you on those points.
Yes, no, I mean, you can't take things personally. As much as we do. And don't get me wrong, sometimes that's not easy. It's like,
Yeah.
you just want to be like, okay, I'm done, and just whatever, see y'all later. But yeah, no, definitely not. And at the same time, I don't plan on going too far with interjecting all of my own personal beliefs into my campaign. So, I want to be an agent or at least a voice for real change, not just what I fantasize about. So, yeah, no,
Excellent. Excellent.
yeah.
Well, this has been great. I'm glad to talk to you anytime, and I'll see you at the debate if not sooner.
Yeah, I wonder how long that's going to be. Like, was
Yeah,
it Peter? And like,
yeah,
oh, all 6 hours of it. I'm like, oh, yeah.
yeah. It's about a month. That's a little more than a month away, I guess.
Yeah, it'll be interesting for sure.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
it'd be fun.
yeah. I'm wondering if we're having more than 7 or 8 if we're having 8 candidates, if we won't want to split it up into 2 days.
I think
Um,
we would have to.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, even at this point, six is a lot, but we
yeah,
shall see, right?
yeah.
Gennady is doing a great job on rolling with the punches as things have come up in the campaign. So it's definitely been a great test
Mm.
and a great learning experience. Especially for a newbie like me, a recovering normie. So
Yeah.
I've
And
enjoyed a lot of.
it's for me, it's the dividing it into 2 days is little to do with the number of people on the panel exactly, but more, even in the last 2 debates, there were audio concerns, and those audio concerns it's a lot easier to address if you only have four hot mics in the mix. When like right now, like I have headphones in, you don't have headphones in. We have very little feedback loop, but if there was even just two more people with headphones in this conversation and yourself, we would be getting a lot more chop. And we would probably be saying, okay, mute your microphone when you're not talking, which is not the best way to have a conversation. If you want to just have a normal back and forth with somebody, it, you know.
Right.
I'm hoping that whatever the case, we'll have a good debate where everyone is heard and there's not a lot of disruptions. Uh, it happened in both the debates and gets a little irritating.
Yeah, yes. It will with each time getting better, right?
Yeah,
I mean, imagine what it's going to be like in the next 4 years after they
mm,
have even more time to plan. So,
yeah,
yeah, I
yeah,
just see it getting better and better.
yeah. But I didn't hear anybody saying that that they couldn't enjoy the debate or understand what was going on because of that. But it can quickly veer into that territory. Um,
Yes. Oh,
as you've
definitely.
probably seen in one or two of my podcasts, someone's in their car, and I just got back from someplace, and there's a little more chop or something. Hopefully, I'm going to be able to avoid that.
Yeah. Live and learn. Live and
Yeah,
learn.
yeah. Okay, I'll talk to you soon, Kim. Thank you.
Sounds good. Thanks, Ben. Bye.
All right.